Hello and welcome back to TVC 22's federal election coverage here in Clarence Rockland for the region of Glengarry-Prescott-Russell. Today I am joined by the People's Party of Canada candidate, Mr. Brennan Austring. How are you?
Good, thanks, sir. Yourself?
Fantastic, doing very well. Thank you very much for joining us today. Great pleasure to have you here and be able to actually talk about the platform that you'll be offering and give the local people a view at all the different candidates and parties that they could potentially vote for come Monday.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I think the best place to start is really to give a little bit about yourself, who you are, where you're from, and if elected, what your priorities would be for the region.
Well, I'm 43 years old. I'm a father of 4. I'm originally from the Northumberland County region, out between Peterborough and Belleville, not far from the Trenton Air Force Base. Grew up a small town guy. I moved to Toronto when I was 19 to kind of spread my wings. And it took me on another adventure with my wife, and we started a family, and I moved down to this region about 13 years ago to take a job in Montreal, and we haven't looked back since.
Fantastic. And obviously the other element there is if elected, I know obviously the party has a certain manifesto. We live in a region that has its own particular requirements.
Yeah,
what would be some of your priorities if you were elected come Monday the 20th?
I think first of all, I need to get, I've been involved in the community, but not enough to know all of the little nuances and the little organizations. And because it's a big geographical region, I think the first step is to get out and just really see what the individual communities need. I'm a big proponent of smaller localized control. I believe that municipalities and local regions know what's best for themselves, and they need to be able to have that authority to make decisions and the flexibility to make those decisions for themselves. So that would be a big priority, just to kind of really get to know the community a lot better. Because obviously, playing hockey here with the family, I know the region, but I don't know Rockland in terms of its personal needs. I don't know Embrun in terms of its structural needs. The Castleman, the same thing. So I think getting out into those communities and just introducing people to who I am, and that's the plan, even regardless of what happens in this election, to push forth with that, introduce people to who we are, to who I am, and to continue that message and just say, I'm here to help, and what is it that you guys need? And instead of forcing an agenda on you guys, I want to listen to what you need, and let's see what we can do together to solidify some solutions.
Well, that takes us on very well to our first topic, which is about the economic relaunch, and I think marrying the two is exactly where we would probably end up heading with some answers here.
Right.
But what would to give people an overview of the People Party of Canada as well as your own mindset here? Obviously, there is a fair amount of debt that the country is in at the moment. A lot of it enforced due to the pandemic and the variety of things that have occurred over the last 18 months. What would be your party's plan to try and get us out of that, get the economy moving again? And as a representative of Glengarry-Prescott-Russell specifically, what would you do to try and help with the region's economic relaunch?
Wow, that's a loaded question, eh?
Wordy.
Yeah. Well, as you know, there's an issue involving a cement plant in the local Lorniel region right now, and I've been somewhat agnostic on the subject. I've just started learning a bit more on it. I jumped into a virtual meeting with Action Champlain, who's very much opposed to the project. And then I've started listening to people that are for the project, and I think there has to be a balance for economic recovery. Again, it's going to boil down to region by region and seeing what their needs are. Instead of having a government force things on a specific region, we need to see what the region really needs, and then work from there. A lot of these communities are bedroom communities too for Ottawa, right? So they serve, to be people that don't want to live in the city, enjoy the country life. Not everybody wants big economic development, but the small towns are also the backbone of this country, right? So it's important that we strike a balance, and obviously the financial aspect of, as you alluded to, we have huge monetary issues in this country right now. So I know I'm giving a vague answer, but we need to definitely figure out with a nuts and bolts concrete approach, exactly what people need and how we can get out of this, and I think a lot of it has to do with keeping an open mind and instead of, like I said, I alluded to earlier, opposing or imposing a specific mandate or ideology on people. Obviously this party's platform is very limited government in its structure. So, allowing people to make decisions again for, what's best for their region and their communities is very important. And I think people know best in those regions. So just to kind of come in and be able to act as a support agent for that kind of development that is required, I think will go a long way to reinforcing our commitment to helping people, but also in actually building those communities in a way that doesn't turn into a resentment, for the government and with the government that may be forcing a mandate on people.
And locally, we have jobs available, but a lack of skilled workers
that's another
to
issue.
fulfill them. We're thinking about the agricultural industry. We're as well thinking about trying to get people back into work, such as in the service industry as well. What kind of steps would you try and take to get those positions filled and get the labour force back up and working again and get the economy moving? Yeah,
that's an interesting question. I've spoken with a lot of people. It's almost like there's been a two-pronged attack on our economy. One is to shut businesses down, which to me is nonsensical, because if you have a mouth to feed, if you have children, a family, whatever the case, the government doesn't have a right to tell you who's essential and who's not. Everybody has a right to get up and go to work and provide for themselves and their family. So the first portion of that attack has been to shut specific sections of the economy down. The other one I find, or what I'm hearing from people, is that in paying people to stay home, the businesses that are busy can't find these people. So I think we would need to tie perhaps CERB payments or something like that to employment. So we know people need more money. Things are expensive today. So, we do need to phase out the CERB. Obviously, it's not something that's sustainable. I know there's a lot of people that are proponents for turning it into a UBI kind of system, and I don't agree with that, but I think there's other ways we can put money in people's pockets. But tying that to employment so that we don't have this problem of people just staying home. I know talking to various motorsports companies and whatnot in our area, there's a lot of people that are coming in and just using that money to purchase recreational vehicles and whatnot. And I think what you're going to see down the road is when there's no employment on the part of these people to sustain those monthly payments, you're going to see a massive influx of vehicles and foreclosures on loans and houses and stuff like that. So.
No, absolutely. Well, you touched on an element there, such as the two-prong that you mentioned, with one that is closing businesses down. The closing down of the businesses was something that governments around the world deemed as a necessary evil, let's say, to be able to try and help us through this unprecedented global health pandemic. Is that a position that you agree with, them closing down these businesses?
Absolutely.
And how would you like to go forward, as we're on the verge of a fourth wave here? We're not out of the pandemic yet. If elected, for example, how would you be looking to push forward with coping with this pandemic?
Look, you're never going to get consensus on this, and I mean, obviously that's why we're the only party that's kind of on the fringe in terms of our ideological perspective on this subject. But whether it's a fourth wave or a fifth wave, we're just going to have to live with this, and some people are at risk, some people aren't. But the structural fabric of protecting a democracy and people's right to choose is on the forefront. The government has no right to determine who is essential and who's not. Absolutely no right at all. So that to me, that's not even a starting point. Everybody should be allowed to be open. There's no reason that if you can't have 200-300 people at Walmart or Costco, but your little mom and pop shop can't stay open. It's that concept is very, very foreign to me, and I disagree with it 1,000%. and even such to the point where, you know, because you're seeing such mass profits generated by these companies like Amazon, you know, and I'm not a big proponent of the government stepping in and, you know, redistributing wealth and things like that. But I mean, these companies made such massive amounts of profit. You know, maybe we should look at taking some of that profit and helping those small businesses, and then making sure that those small businesses are allowed to stay open and function on the same kind of competitive level as you know, because a lot of these small businesses are in these small communities, right? Mm. You know, the major corporations are usually isolated to the cities, and you know, therefore you don't always feel the impact as much in those regions. But the small towns run on, you know, that's the backbone of this country, right? Is small towns and small businesses. So I think they need to be supported 100%.
Absolutely, and we do have some fantastically locally owned stores here that was very much emphasised during the buy local campaigns that existed. Touching a little bit more on the healthcare crisis at the moment, because it is what it is. We are in the middle of a pandemic, and it's impossible to do this election coverage without talking about it. And one of the big things is about, you mentioned there about forcing things on people. I have to ask, what is your stance on the process of mandatory vaccines in certain areas and vaccine passports to be able to access certain events? What's your view on that?
Well, I'm sure you've researched the party platform. We're 100% against it. You know, that it's a violation of the Charter of Rights. It's a violation of many, I believe, all provincial laws. I'd have to, don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure that the Charter covers all of us anyway, right, as Canadians. So I've had lots of conversations with people that say that, well, you know, an Emergency Measures Act can supersede the Charter, but there's nothing that supersedes the Charter. The Charter was meant to protect people's liberties, their rights and freedoms. Exactly the situation that we find ourselves in today, the situation where, you know, people are being deemed non-essential, so they have to close their businesses, and that's, again, you know, we 100% disagree with that.
Obviously, you've got a lot of health specialists out there who are saying that vaccines are the only realistic way for us to come out of this pandemic. So what would the alternative be if we can't, I'm not saying can't force it, that's probably the wrong phrasing for it there, but if they're pushing it this way because on scientific and doctor data and advice, what's the alternative here? What's the People's Party of Canada proposing?
It's frustrating. I find a lot of times, especially today, with like we were talking earlier, with the polarization of our world, that we can't even have a dialogue today. Like, it's gone so far out of the realm of any kind of normalcy that for two people to have opposing views to sit down and actually just say, like, you know, you have people that are maybe more on the conspiratorial side, and you have people that are maybe, you know, dead set on listening to mainstream media and what mainstream media has to say, and somewhere in between is the truth. But I mean, there's lots of evidence. We've been a year and a half into this. There's lots of doctors. I mean, as many doctors that are pro these measures, there are equally as number that are there are equally as many doctors that are opposed to these measures. And there are therapeutics, there are lots of alternative treatments that can boost your immune system. If you're looking to talk about health and wellness, I mean, if you want to really focus on health and wellness, then why are we not mandating people go to the gym? Let's have a passport and make sure we have people going to the gym 4 days a week, you know. Let's ban soft drinks, let's ban junk food, you know, because it's a lot of people. We have a very unhealthy society, right? We have unhealthy eating habits. We overeat, you know, we eat the improper foods. You know, people are forced to wear masks, but you're letting people go out and smoke and then come back in, and then you have to listen to people say, well, you know, you need to wear a mask to protect me, even though I smoke a pack of cigarettes a day. So I find it hard to swallow, you know, and I think we just need to sit down, take a deep breath, open up the lines of communication again, start having conversations about what's real and what's not real. You know, is there a virus? Yes. Is it dangerous? It's dangerous to some people. It's not dangerous to other people. You know, how do we get through this? right? Are we going to continue after a year and a half to just put the same measures in place? Because to me, it looks more like a control grid coming in than health measures. So what's the end game here? You know, we need to sit down and open up a dialogue and say, all right, if these people are at risk and they're scared, you know, we've got the resources. We've got Uber Eats, we've got delivery services. We can get these people their groceries. You know, we can take care of the vulnerable. We don't need to shut down society. You know, it's not the right approach at all, and I think it's caused way more damage than problems that have been solved as a result of the lockdown measures.
Yeah, I have to move on to the next theme here. Like looking at affordable housing and childcare, two very big topics, two very big issues in the region. Affordable and available childcare close to our homes that provides the flexibility for each one's different working schedules is very hard to come by. Same along the lines of affordable housing with lists as long as your arm, with people trying to get on them and struggling to find homes that they can pay for that aren't taking up a huge proportion of their paychecks. What role do you believe the MP should play in these two issues in our society, and how would you go about handling them?
Oh, another good issue. Yeah, there's a variety of issues with our childcare. I know with the government's proposal for universal daycare programs and whatnot, I mean, me and my wife, we raised our 4 children. We worked opposite shifts because we couldn't afford the daycare. It was, you know, $25, $30 a day. It's very expensive. I know Quebec is often touted for their daycare program, right? They've got their $7 a day daycare. And a lot of people appreciate that program. But I find it's really, the children end up going to these institutes at a very young age. So I was speaking with a buddy the other day, and I just happened to make a suggestion to him. You know, why wouldn't the government offer us a solution where if the mother wanted to stay home, you're paying a lot of child youth workers, or not youth workers, sorry, early educators, decent amount of money with benefits, and you know, you've got the infrastructure in place, and I think it's in Quebec it's a ratio of about 4 to 1 for children to educators. Why not offer the mother the opportunity, or the father the opportunity, to stay home for that time period and pay them the $30 or $25 an hour, you know, and just instead of forcing somebody to go in a specific direction, open up opportunities for people to have their choice. You know, if I want to stay home with my child, right, why am I going to be penalized for that, right? Why am I forced to send my child into a daycare system that because that's my only option, right? So it's just other options. Housing too, I know if you don't have to look very far. Call a place, a landlord who's got a duplex or a triplex for rent. You've got 60, 70 people calling for the same unit. There's bidding wars just like on the houses today. That's a complex issue. And I think some of it perhaps ties into the environmental regulations that we face in this country, and the rate at which it's a challenge to get new homes on the market, and building permits, and just the hoops and the regulatory burden that we're faced with. So, and also, you know, when you start bringing in 400,000+ people a year, and you don't have, yes, maybe we have the jobs for them, but we don't have the housing for them, you can create other problems. So I think it's a broad spectrum issue that you have to look. I don't think you can take one single perspective and say this is going to fix it. And I think we need to have more politicians that are actually willing to listen instead of talk, and say, okay, you know, maybe you've got a good idea, even though, you know, we might have politically different views, but that perhaps is a good idea that you're presenting. So I'm going to take that and I'm going to use that, and we're going to work together. But again, it goes back to the polarization, and everything is so rigid, and this is my view and I'm not going to flex on that view. So nothing gets done. And I think we need to all part of dialogue, right? Open up that dialogue and figure out exactly how we can solve these issues together.
Talking about something more cross-platform there at that point. The last issue we're really going to touch on today is about rural connectivity. Obviously, it's a massive problem that's been exposed by the pandemic, because it strengthens community bonds. It allows people to work remotely as well as be able to contact people, such as we experienced last year. How high a priority for yourself is increasing the connectivity issues, whether it be internet or cell gaps, in our local region? And would you be willing to build off some of the work done by the Liberals, or is it something that you'd look to start again?
No, I think last year and a half ago, we just received Bell 5 internet in Hawkesbury, so the lines are coming out. I think it was a little delayed in the sense that we were only able to get like 5 megabytes a second download speed for years and years and years. So being on the main corridor between two of the largest cities in the country, yeah, I mean, it's for sure it's important. I mean, it's important for local economies, and it brings opportunity and stuff. It allows for expansion of industry and yes, people to work from home, which can also be a benefit if you are looking at from an environmental standpoint and you want to reduce commuting and whatnot. It allows people to live in these rural communities without having to worry about maybe commuting and spending that extra money on cars and maintenance and fuel and stuff like that. But yeah, I think it's an important issue. I think it's something that should be built upon. But I think a lot of these issues too are national security issues, and I think it even borders into the point you touched on earlier about not being able to find people and employment, the employment issues that we're facing today, right? These to me are national security issues. Like if we can't build an infrastructure, if we don't have mechanics, if we don't have plumbers, if we don't have computer scientists, like we need to be promoting everything, right? Because it reaffirms the strength of a country. So I think that all of these areas are of the utmost importance, and again, we need to go to the communities, but we definitely need a large plan to support this kind of infrastructure and progress for our society.
Fantastic. Well, we've arrived at the end of our time. It flies by. I mean, to cover everything in this election, we need a whole day and a half, I think. But finally, I just want, in conclusion, to give you the last word here, to be able to have the opportunity to speak to the residents of Glengarry-Prescott-Russell, the people watching right now. Why should they vote People's Party, and why should they vote for you, Mr. Austring?
I think people understand this election that the primary issue here is to secure the rights and freedoms that our ancestors fought for. I mean, that is paramount. There are a whole host of other issues, and many of them are very, very important and absolutely need to be addressed. But the key polarizing issue in this election happens to be these passports and the mandation of certain things and the radical shift in our society that people are not comfortable with, right? And it's something that is not it's not something that's indicative of a democratic society. And I think we need to really take a look, people that are pushing these mandates and shaming people for personal choices. I think we really need to sit down and take a breath and just try to see everybody's perspective and say, listen, what are we fighting for here? We're fighting for people's rights to choose. I mean, this is an age-old battle. It goes back to the civil rights movement, to the women's lib movement, and not that I'm tying them all together, but I mean we definitely need to protect our freedoms, and I think that's the main issue that's driving people's decision this election. So.
All right, well, thank you very much for coming down and speaking to us today. Thank you very much for speaking to us about your views and values, and I hope that it has helped everyone else at home get closer to making the decision they need to make. Make sure you go check out all the other election candidate interviews we have on our YouTube and Facebook pages. Thank you for watching.
Thanks.